Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today. Before we get started, if you'd like to ask a question at any point during the webinar, you can enter it in the questions section of the webinar control panel. We'll then answer all your questions at the end. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Hans.
Thank you. Well, hello everybody. We're so glad you could join us today. And we're going to be talking today about APS and MES and how they work better together, frankly, how you get better results when you are using APS for planning and MES for shop floor execution. So I'm going to start out today talking a little bit about my experiences as a scheduler. So 20 some years ago, I was responsible for scheduling 2 plastic packaging plants. And the setup that I had at that time was I had an office out in the middle of the plant with one wall was just glass looking out over the plant where I could have my desk facing the plant and I would hear the rhythm of the machines all day. It was always out there, always aware of the production that was going on. And in that room, the other 3 walls were magnetic whiteboards. And so that is how I scheduled, by using these magnetic whiteboards like you see in the images on this slide. And so in doing the scheduling and the responsibilities that I had for both of these packaging plants, it was kind of tricky, right? You know, like any scheduler, I had to assure, my mission was to be sure that I had basically the right parts available at the right time. That was what, like any scheduler, that is what we needed to do. So when you walked into my room, first thing you get hit with is the smell of Sharpie ink because I had so many colored pens and stickers and color-coded printed labels because I had to figure out with hundreds, in some cases even thousands of these tags, how, you know, where everything was and understand statuses and to be able to get to some kind of an understanding of where we were with the schedule. And so the reality of it, though, was that even though it was a tool to do the scheduling, it was almost impossible to react to changes, right? A change on the upfront operations would totally disrupt the finishing operations downstream. And trying to figure that out was very difficult, what the impact would be. To do what if scenarios was a nightmare. What if we take this order? And I had to answer those questions daily. What if we bring this big order in? What impact is that going to have? It was almost impossible to commit to any kind of delivery dates because at the best, I just sort of had to guess and go through and in my mind add all of this up. It was very tough. And then, as if all of that wasn't tricky enough, on top of that, the operators on off shifts would come in and mess with the schedule. And you know, well, I don't want to do a setup, so I'm just going to move this job up there because I know I won't have to do a setup, and it would completely disrupt all the work that I had done the day before. So I was constantly fighting all of those battles. Now, I know this all sounds like a really negative way to start this webinar, but it's for a purpose. I'm going to guess there are some people with us today who are familiar with these kinds of dynamics, who have dealt with this at some point and understand how complex it is. It's a hard job. It is definitely not easy to do.
So Hans, obviously this is Neil. Hello everyone. I'm obviously very familiar with manufacturing technology, but I've not worked directly in a scheduling role. So really, what is the big deal with scheduling, Hans? Why is it so hard?
Yeah, why is it so hard? Well, I've got some something to illustrate it. So look at these 5 objects, 5 colored objects, all different, representing, I'm going to say this is one piece of equipment in a plant with 5 jobs on it, and we'll say that represents 1 day's worth of work. How many combinations possible do you think that is? And as you see, we popped up the answer there. It's 120 combinations just possible with these 5 jobs, okay? So now let's take that one step further and say now we have 2 pieces of equipment in the plant, each with the same number of jobs on them, but these jobs could be run on either of these pieces of equipment. And so how many do we think we have to deal with there? And before it was 120, so is it 240, 600? No, it's 14,400 different combinations are possible with that. Now think about that for a minute. How many machines do you have in your plant? And how many days of work do you have on each one? I mean, are you out 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? And are the operations all linked? Certainly, if you're doing very complex work, you're going to have multiple different operations linked to multiple pieces of equipment throughout your plant. And when you're looking at this simple scenario of 1 day of work with 2 pieces of equipment, and you're talking about 14,400 possible combinations, it's impossible. It's just impossible to achieve that with any kind of a manual tool.
So now I get it, Hans. My hat is off to the master schedulers in the room that have done it or are still doing it with whiteboards and magnets.
Right. So let me go on, Neil. So like many schedulers, right, I had a pretty tough journey. And so things got more and more complex. And as they did, we realized we needed a tool. I was not able to do what we needed to do without some kind of a tool. So we went to the world's most popular piece of software, Excel. And that was the next step in the journey. So we went from the whiteboards to Excel. And did it become better? Absolutely, it did. However, a lot of it was just a trade-off because it ended up just being a different kind of manual work that I was doing. Instead of being on the wall, instead of it being susceptible to operators messing with it, at least it was controlled on my desktop, right? So it was a different kind of manual work. And so they're still very manual work intensive. And I didn't have ties from one operation to another. I had limited ability to do my color coding, to recognize the patterns that helped me seal all of this in my head, where everything was in the schedule. And reacting to change was no better. At best, it was difficult. And it just was not helping me enough to be efficient and to be on time. And it was still really difficult for me to promise any kind of due dates.
So what was the next step in your journey, Hans, that you took from whiteboards to Excel? Where did you go from there?
Okay, yeah. So like many companies, we needed a new ERP system. And so we saw this as the golden opportunity to let's be sure we get an ERP system that has a scheduling tool in it. And that's gonna revolutionize scheduling. We're very excited about it, that's what we were gonna do. So we went through this very painful implementation. The ERP implementations are always really hairy. They're pretty tough. And part of that was the scheduling. And then when you looked at the difference between where we came from and what we had now, there were definitely some things about it that were better, right? When you talk about ERP scheduling tools, and there's many of them, right? Just as many as the ERPs, there's a scheduling tool, but there are some consistencies across them. They may be user-friendly, but you're still usually doing mostly manual work, still dragging and dropping, placing things, making all of those decisions. And yes, you may have some visibility that you didn't have before. To say your materials typically is about all you really have. And that in itself is very limited as well. You're really only going to get a feel for maybe what materials do you need for that entire job, not on an operation by operation basis. It may update orders automatically, drop off the schedule when they're completed, that kind of stuff. But then there's stuff that really, really matters when you're dealing with a tough, complex schedule. I have no ability to do what if scenarios. As if that wasn't enough, then dealing with the whole thing of infinite versus finite capacity was crazy. And then any kind of constraints that we had in there, we just couldn't do it. So again, it was very difficult. And just the inability to do what if scenarios alone was enough to just be frustrating.
So just to expand on that topic a little bit then, Hans, Could you provide a couple of examples of what if scenarios that you may have seen in your career or that a planner sees today?
Yeah, may have seen. How about daily? The president comes in and says, we've got a hot order for, I'll just say Acme Corporation. It's our largest customer. And I need you to squeeze this order in. But by the way, don't make anything else late. So when I would object, as I always had to, and say, look, we've got finite capacity here, right? You can't just say dial it up to 11. That just doesn't work, right? We have to, something's got to give. And so then they would come back and say, okay, no problem. Tell me what's going to be late and by how much, and walk out of the room. And that would be typically a 2-hour assignment that I absolutely didn't need because I had a plant to run, right? So it would take that much time to do that. So that's a brutal one, and any scheduler knows that. And you just know the cringe when you see that person walk into your office. Uh-oh, here it comes. Other scenarios, right? Another really common scenario is we had, just like so many places, we really had to depend on our labor. We had a lot of labor intensive activities. And when suddenly, because of weather or illness or some form of discontent, 10% of your workforce doesn't show up, what did I do? What were my options? How could I handle that? Very realistic scenario that happens. And so I would find myself, I would do really 3 things: scramble, negotiate, and mandate is what it ended up coming down to. I would scramble to find people who were trained and capable. Is anybody having a day off that we can call in? Well, that's almost assuring that they're going to start looking for work somewhere else. And then start negotiating and go and beg and wheedle with customer service or other salespeople. I'll trade you these 2 jobs for that 1 job, and go through this horse trading exercise. It was ridiculous, but again, it would have to do that. And when all of that didn't work, then it would just come down to mandating overtime. And of course, nobody wants to do overtime, but that's where so often I ended up just got to mandate some kind of overtime. I could never react quickly enough to the changes that came and hit me.
Okay, yeah, no, that makes sense. And spoiler for the next slide when we get to it is to actually introduce what a advanced planning and scheduling tool is. But just as a side note, I wanted to just talk about another KPI that a customer reported to me after they implemented production tracking ShopVue solution on the shop floor. Right? They soon realized that the models that they were using for downtime was inaccurate at best. And they actually realized that on an average week, they were dealing with a 14% unplanned downtime. And it was really tough for them to be able to plan and schedule until they knew that accurate number. So as we go through the rest of this presentation, right, we'll start talking about access to real-time data and how that's really important to effectively inform the planning tools and enable these what-if scenarios to actually be able to be executed efficiently with accurate data. And we're on the ERP screen here, right? These ERP scheduling tools don't easily accommodate that input.
No, they definitely do not. So let me just talk a little bit about what APS is then. Not everybody's familiar with it. APS, Advanced Planning and Scheduling. So as it says, planning and scheduling. It's a 2-piece kind of tool. The planning portion of it is something that will enable long-term capacity and stock planning, right? It's something that is going to be longer term, it's going to be more abstract, it's going to go into buckets, that kind of time buckets, but it's not going to be constrained as the schedule is, the real-time kind of tool set that you have with the schedule. So when we talk about then the schedule portion of it and what scheduling, what scheduling systems are within APS, then we're talking about really a range of tools, from something that's really basic resource run rate. We know this piece of equipment runs at 200 pieces per minute, right? To multiple constraint scheduling, taking into account labor, materials, tooling, and employs advanced rules, the rules that you use in your shop to match really what it is that you do, the whole production and the business environment you have. So it is a range of tools. But the better ones, the best tools, and UpCenter APS is one of these tools, they are heuristic based. It's rules that define the behavior of the tool, not a mathematical algorithm that could just go on and run endlessly trying to achieve perfection, because if you used a mathematical algorithm, by the time it reached its conclusion, something else would have changed and then the whole schedule would be obsolete and it would have to start all over again. Reality is that you need a tool that is going to mimic what you're doing on the shop floor in a realistic environment and then give you an output that is something that you can trust and something that you can communicate throughout the organization. And that's what APS gives you.
That's a great overview, Hans. Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah. So and then moving on, right? More about this. It's not just lining things up, scheduling things, sequencing things, arranging things. It's way more than that. It has an impact across the entire organization. And this is what a lot of people really need to understand about an APS system. So if you look at this image, in the middle, we have these value drivers, and I'm defining value drivers as what makes you money, right? What makes you profitable? What sets you apart from other companies? And so working through these value drivers, the impact, again, it goes beyond the shop floor, because you see things like a massive improvement in customer service right out of the gate. And yes, you do see an improvement in productivity, but you're taking advantage of things like improving your quality, your inventories, and you've got assets out there, sweat them, right? Make the best use of your labor without burning your people out. And also even taking things to market, right? You can take things to market more quickly. So there's a lot of these types of benefits that you get with an APS system that people just tend not to even consider, but it has a system-wide impact. And so Neil, I mean, I know that when you add MES to the mix, right, you gain even more. So I'm sure that then the MES has some impact on some of these areas as well.
Sure, yeah, absolutely, Hans. MES, obviously specifically ShopVue, with my background, is deployed to optimize your people, processes, your orders, your machines, and your materials on the shop floor. And often, our customers have reported to me, tangible benefits soon after deploying ShopVue, like 15% productivity improvement, perhaps a 28% reduction in scrap by managing process execution with the built-in quality controls at every step. And obviously, as a result of that, by doing things right first time, and Hans talked about this earlier, overtime being a kind of a catch-all to recover, many customers can cut their overtime by 30% or more by doing things right first time. So we'll transition. I want to talk to you a little bit about why MES is part of this partnership of efficiency. So we all know that manufacturing organizations are focused on a common goal, right? You're working with your colleagues, you're working with your partners, and the term of Industry 4.0 or digital transformation is interchangeable. But fundamentally, this is your goal, right? To optimize the production of their manufacturing sites. And for many of our customers, those are global. All manufacturers, whether they leverage man or machine, right, whether they're fully automated or they're labor intensive, want to best configure their assets deployed in support of these business strategies. So as I said, there are organizations that rely on human capital, and everyone else, right, in the service side of the business has a responsibility to service the individuals that are making the product and making the money. And then there are manufacturers that are moving towards light out work centers, right? Autonomous actions, reacting to changing environments. You can't switch a digital transformation overnight, and the beauty of ShopVue is that we can provide solutions to our customers wherever they are in their journey. So let's get into the why MES and APS together, and I'll let Hans.
Together. Absolutely, yeah. So Neil and I worked on this together, and we felt that showing a simple diagram that defines a typical data flow would kind of help people understand how this all works out. So we'll start with, the idea of an ERP system, right? Almost everyone's got one. And so when we're talking about systems like Op Center APS and ShopVue MES that would integrate with the ERP system, the ERP system is the host and a system of record for the majority of the data. Now, we can put some data in. If you can't keep it in the ERP, we can talk about that. Those are details. But the bottom line is that that's the ERP. And then if you think of it in this way, right, you've got your ERP system that holds all the data, and the APS is a toolkit to optimize the planning and the scheduling workflows that come out of that ERP system. And the MES then becomes the system of execution of that plan and schedule. So you can look at it in that way. So we have the ERP system that delivers static data to the schedule, right? Static data, bills and materials, routings, item records, and that sort of thing, as well as the supply and demand data. So all the raw materials required, the sales orders, forecast orders, all that kind of information that is putting a demand on that. And then it comes to the schedule, where the schedule is worked, and then we deliver back to the ERP system updates from the schedule, and then ultimately then also from the schedule, we're able to get reports. And those reports could be everything from a printed work to list that you send out to the floor, to late order reports for customer service, to metrics, KPIs, and so forth. And all of that then is delivered from the schedule.
Okay, so Op Center APS is also releasing the schedule to the MES. And this is to communicate the shift's work list to the operators, and they're doing this digitally. This eliminates the need for paper travelers with all the detailed order information. It ensures that the planned schedule is actually executed and orders are not cherry-picked at the work center. So now, if everything goes to plan, data is being fed back and delivery dates are being met. But as we all know, not everything goes to plan, right? You have unplanned downtime, you have WIP scrap that's created upstream, and many other gotchas, right, that will impact the ability to execute a schedule. So that's why we have this closed loop, real-time feedback from MES to ERP and to APS. And at the end of the day, this scenario results in benefits of accurate costing, right? That's obviously useful to your customer service team, your sales team as they're quoting. Visibility into WIP, making sure that you are planning your inventories and your buys and your deliveries from your suppliers. It's giving you accurate standards, right? Making sure that, again, your costing is accurate, but making sure that your resources in the shop floor really know what they should be doing as far as performance at every operation. All this drives to accurate and obviously improving OEE and actual material consumption, right? Not relying on backflushing finished goods, but actually consuming at the operations. And at the end of the day, with the ERP, the APS, and the MES all humming together, you will see measurable production benefits. Okay, Hans is going to talk us through a couple of case studies next, some real-world success, and hopefully this will be of interest to the audience.
Yeah. All right, thanks, Neil. All right, so the first one we want to talk about is one of our customers, Hoerbiger Corporation. It's a single plant machine shop, but they're large. And as you can see from these numbers, complexity was one of their biggest challenges, right? So on any given day, there's 1,000 live orders out on the floor, each of them with at least 10 components and averaging about 10 operations each. So that is a massive amount of complexity to have to deal with And so the big thing that for them was, they had this huge complex problem, and it was very difficult for them to be efficient. It was very difficult for them to promise orders and make sure that they were nailing it as they had to. And so they had a 20% increase in efficiency and throughput the first week after they went live, with no increase of staff or resources. And that just blew their minds so much that they went back and reworked the numbers numerous times just to be sure that they were actually getting that result. And they were. And that was just an amazing thing that they realized.
Yeah, that's quite the improvement in the first week. Do you want to talk a little bit more about how they got there?
I mean, it's really pretty straightforward. Improved sequencing was a huge one, and then feedback from the MES. With so much complexity going on, being able to sequence things in the most efficient way and have instant feedback from what's happening out on the shop floor enabled them to be on top of it, enabled them to realize, I mean, that 20% increase right away.
Okay.
It was a big, easy win that they were not anticipating, they were not expecting.
They were hoping for, I'm sure.
Absolutely, they were hoping for, and they were very, very pleased about it. So this case study of Hoerbiger Corporation, it's on our website, as well as a joint two-part webinar we did with them in April 2021, where he shared, the VP of Operations shared his successful experience with Op Center APS specifically in a lean manufacturing environment. And he made this statement. He makes this statement in the case study. He shared it during the webinar. He said, when you go to school, you get a 92%, that's an A. He said, but in their business, a 99% is a failure. And that's because they have to hit it 100% every time. And he points out the obvious, which is it's impossible for one person to be able to just keep track of all of these many parts and pieces and moving parts and things changing and all of that going on when only one part not being available at the right time is a failure for that order. He said it's just impossible to do that, and I certainly agree. And so in their case, their success relied heavily on the tool giving them certainly the grouping and everything to increase their efficiencies, but giving them the visibility that they needed, not just where an order is and when you think it's going to be done, but where all of the orders are that go into that final order, and whether all the subcomponents are going to be on time or not. So that was a big win for them to overcome the kind of complexity that they had. So Neil, if you could go forward. So I had a couple images to talk a little bit about this complexity. And so, the image here is an image from the Op Center APS scheduling board. This is a typical machine shop, not unlike Hoerbiger's, the kind of shop that they have. And so when you look at this image, you can see a lot of colors, indicating maybe a group, a job, and all of its different steps would share the same color. So you can kind of trace it that way. But it's really much simpler to be able to just highlight one job with a click and see all of the components, all the related components, from the sales order or whatever the demand is driving it, all the way back through to all of the components, which then come into the various operations when they're needed. Not everything at the beginning of the job, but when they are needed, so that you can run very tightly to when your materials will be here, when they'll be available. Another view of the schedule, another tool that can help you is you can, for instance, see a pivot table view of the Gantt chart. I call it a pivot table view, where you switch the vertical axis. So that could be a part number, a product family, a primary raw material, colors, things like that, or as I'm showing you here in this example, to group them by customer and to be able to see all of the orders that you have for any given customer and know exactly the status of any of those orders. It's a huge deal. And then being able to see your materials as well. So having the visibility into your inventory, being able to see all of the raw materials, inventory, purchase orders, and even subcomponent work orders, how they all come together into that work order that you're working on, and then to be able to see the output of that and see what is it feeding, what demand is it feeding, whether it's another work order or whether it's a sales order, whether it's going into inventory. All of that's available with just a few clicks.
Yeah, thanks, Hans. I think that's a really good overview of some typical APS use cases. I think we have time. Let's take a quick look at another case study.
Yeah, so complexity is one thing, efficiency is another. And so I want to focus on kind of on the efficiency on this case study. This is a large customer of ours, Berry Global packaging company, and they are one of the largest in North America. We did a very large project for them. As you can see, we took in an 18-month period, we took 55 plants live. And as a side note, that was on time and under budget. And so when you look at that with so many plants, even a 1% improvement in efficiency would be absolutely massive. And so, they were having problems. They had challenges with changeovers. That was a big one for them, losing all kinds of time to setup time. Supply chain interruptions, of course, we all know what that's about, but they also had work in process piling up at certain workstations, which was a big problem that they had. And, they were losing, the schedulers at every plant were doing their own thing, their own way, and there was no consistency across the organization. And so during the pandemic, which we all experienced painfully experiences during the pandemic, they were losing labor as well. So the challenge that they had then in 2020, they faced massive interruptions from COVID to the supply chain, to labor, and all the while this was going on, the demand for certain products just went through the roof and increased at peak levels. So they had to make some decisions. And I have a quote on the next slide that addresses this whole situation. They had to make some decisions about, they had to shut down, they knew they had to shut down lines. They just didn't have the people to run them. And in some cases, they had to shut down some entire plants temporarily. And all of this is against the backdrop of increased levels of demand for some of their products. And so the decision of what lines to take down, what plants could be offline for a while and so forth, was a very, very complex activity, multiple days involved. But once they had this system in place, it was really, they were able to just do this in some cases minutes, some cases hours. So it was a huge, huge savings of time and efficiency for them. They didn't miss a beat, and they were able to continue and recover from a lot of what was hitting them.
Okay, one of the three major benefits was changeovers. So I thought what we would do, Hans, was kind of drill into how MES and APS can really help our customers reduce changeover times. So let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah.
I think there's a high-level philosophy within the industry of manufacturers' workforces executing tasks at 80% accuracy. I think it's fair. There's been lots of studies where that number's pretty accurate. So that's why anything you do from a continuous improvement initiative, whether it's APS, MES, or other tools, you're really looking to chip away, right, at that 20% of activities that are most likely to be executed incorrectly. So we'll start by looking at APS.
Yeah, so this is a real quick, simple to grasp visual. This is, again, a schedule from a semiconductor placement facility. And so the idea here is, and what you're seeing with these colors, is that product families, grouping together by product families, is the most efficient way, because when you went from one product family to another, it incurred a setup. So grouping them would minimize those changeovers. And so if you look at this, the metric or the KPI at the top left, you can see there's 1,000 hours of setup time when it's scheduled just simply forward by due date without considering those efficiencies. But then after running an out-of-the-box simple algorithm to group these together by family, then we saw that setup go from 1,000 hours to 162 hours in the schedule. I mean, that's massive. However, it's not all that simple. It's not like push a button and everything's great, because if you'll notice, the on-time percent went from 95% to 85%. And so here now is where the skill of the scheduler comes into play, right? It still takes skill to do that. So instead of maybe going out, as I did here, 30 days and pulling orders in to group them, maybe they can run it again and do it in 25 days, run it again, pull in 20 days of work, run it again with 15, until you find that magical balance between on-time delivery and minimizing the setups. And then you say, that's the sweet spot. Now that's the schedule that I'm going to choose, and that's the one that I'm going to publish. And again, balance is the goal. And this tool lets you determine where that balance lies. And so the users become, I'm going to say, skilled masters at the art of scheduling. And this is a tool that gives them the ability to make the best decision, and that these are decisions that they can justify and that they can stand behind.
That makes a lot of sense. Finding that sweet spot's always a challenge, right?
Absolutely.
So in this example, I'm going to take a step up and I'm going to look at what the process engineering team would be doing within a typical manufacturing. This is actually an extruding line in the automotive supply chain. They're basically setting up machine parameters, right, for setting up these extruding lines. So the same profile or part number, right, will require different settings, right? You see here pump speeds, pressures, etc., based on which extruding line the job will run on. So the engineering team is going to build a library in advance, and when the APS schedules a particular part number to a specific extruding line, the setup tasks are going to be delivered automatically to the operator at the machine. So this console configuration here is a ShopVue console, and it's presenting machine setup for the operator or the maintenance team, whoever's executing that process. So the parameters for the specific job are executed. They're validated digitally by the machine operator as they work through these setups. Media, whether it be photos, videos, drawings, maybe manuals, anything that's going to help set the machine up accurately will be dynamically presented, and will really just eliminate any concerns that the operator may go grab an outer revision paper setup sheet from the filing cabinet, right? It's all revision controlled and presented on the screen on their tablet that they're working on. The operator then is going to be recording the actual setup results and even like first article inspections, right, as they set the machine up. And because this data is not being collected on paper, right, it's accessible. It can be analyzed by engineering. It can be presented on real-time dashboards, perhaps even with PLCs reporting the actual pump speeds, pump pressures, etc. So you can really keep an eye on what's going on during the day-to-day run. And these trends, right? Maybe even with an AI engine can start to review these trends and identify needs for training or even for tuning the manufacturing process to make sure the ramp up to optimal production speeds are achieved as fast as possible. As Hans previously mentioned, right, managing work in progress and raw material inventory can be a challenge in many manufacturing environments. So rather than backflushing raw materials when finished goods hit the shipping dock or go into your warehouse, ShopVue can track real-time material consumption, including good pieces, including scrap, that will result in accurate inventories without the need for investing time in excessive cycle counting. So as we mentioned earlier, this real-time data ensures that the ERP and the APS is using accurate information when they're updating the plans and responding to those what-if scenarios of the president inserting a priority order into the mix. We talked earlier about reports, right? MES and APS can often deliver rich visual KPIs, right? On-time deliveries, overall labor efficiencies, OEE, maybe even like a heat map, right, for order location tracking. All of this provided in real time, right, to ensure that your operations management team, when they go into their daily meetings, have their finger on the pulse of what's going on the shop floor. And as I mentioned earlier, the state is also going to leverage key insights for continuous improvement activities. So we have a couple more slides just to wrap up the webinar, and then we will be reviewing your questions.
Yeah. All right. So again, APS and MES working together, the synergy that they generate is really, really significant. And you've got tools, right? You've got tools here to minimize setup, sequence with product attributes and that kind of thing, managing constraints, your labor, your tooling, managing all those things on the shop floor as well. And having the visibility to your supply chain, to your order status, managing your labor and tooling, essentially being able to operate with more automation and a clear control of the workflow allows you to become more proactive as opposed to being reactive and always running around putting fire out. And then, again, having the MES providing real-time feedback on the production, completions, unplanned downtimes, bottlenecks, labor limitations, all of that is a very, very significant group of benefits to add to any production environment.
Okay, let's just talk for a couple of minutes about our organizations, and then we'll address the questions.
All right, so just real quickly, our company, ATS Lean Scheduling International, APS is what we do. We are focused on advanced planning and scheduling and have been for over 25 years. We did start working with Op Center APS. At the time, the product was known as Preactor, but it's essentially the same product today, Op Center APS, only much more mature. But we started with that in 2001. And so our team, we have numerous people on our team we have 4 people on our team that I can point to who have over 20 years experience with the product. The average is 13 years of our engineers, 13 years experience with the product. So we really know what we're doing. We were acquired then by ATS Global in 2021, and that gave us the world, gave us a global presence. We're now in 25 plus countries around the world. North America, though, has typically been our focus. And in North America, of all the Op Center APS users, 80% of them are in our customer base. We have over 250 implementations. And just to finish up, about our company, our philosophy is that we want to build long-term relationships that grow, that help our customers grow, and we like to stay with them along the way and help them achieve those goals. So we have many, many customers that have been with us for a long, long time, and that's just the way we've grown our business and how we proceed.
Thanks, Hans. So I think it might be useful if I just take a few moments to explain the building blocks of ShopVue MES and our platform. Our customers typically adopt ShopVue in 3 fundamental areas. The first is labor management, represented on the left-hand side of this. Call it a maturity curve, where you manage all your shop activity with integrated time and attendance, streamlined workflows for operators, for supervisors, and for HR and payroll. As you move to the right and you kind of migrate up this maturity curve, our customers are getting into digital factory and advanced manufacturing. They're moving away from the paper travelers and they're getting into paperless factory capabilities. They're digitalizing and integrating with machines with our IoT solution. They're getting full genealogy for those industries that require full traceability of all their processes and all their products. We also deliver solutions to the connected worker with digital work instructions in labor-intensive business units, where you spoon feed your operators on how to execute the task at hand. From start to finish, ShopVue helps our customers track every step in the manufacturing process, and revealing mission critical data as you go to keep your plans humming. Much like Hans, we are North American grown business, but we are global deployments, and we are expanding our customer base into Europe through partnerships and through investments as a result of acquisitions. So everyone's excited, and we're moving forward and happy to be working with our manufacturing customers. Tom, do you have any questions that were asked?
Yes, we do have a few that have come through. So to start with, does it matter what ERP we are running in our operations? Will your APS and MES solutions integrate?
Hans, do you want to answer this
Yeah,
first?
sure, certainly. For Op Center APS, that is just a non-issue because it has a whole tool set designed to integrate to any system. We have yet to meet an ERP that we can't integrate to, even homegrown systems. So yeah, there's no issue there with us.
Okay, yeah, from the ShopVue MES perspective, we productize our connectors for the tier 1, tier 2, and often the tier 3 ERPs that we work with. But those that we come across for the first time, we have a toolkit, and it will just be configured to receive and send data. So yeah, the short answer is both systems are completely ERP agnostic.
Great. Okay, next question. We have a connected machine network. Can the setup parameters be delivered to the machine PLCs directly?
Great question. Yeah, so we didn't spend too long on it, but that extruding line scenario that I talked about earlier, they actually connect each parameter with a PLC tag, right? And whether it be pump pressure or temperature. So yeah, ShopVue can be system used to validate. We can also work with the DNC solution to communicate directly the setup for those maybe modern equipment that don't require engineers or operators to actually set up the machine. So yeah, connected. And I think just in general terms, Tom, connected environments and eliminating silos of systems across manufacturing sites is a trend that's only going to continue over the next coming years. So if anyone's thinking about purchasing any systems, right, to help on your shop floor, make sure that you ask the question around interoperability, around sharing data, around connectivity. So yeah, that was a great question.
All right, and now, can we schedule maintenance for our equipment?
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah, there's every resource has a calendar behind it, an availability calendar, so you can very accurately define the time that those are available. And so we can even integrate to preventative maintenance systems and take the data from that. But the bottom line is you can block out time for maintenance well in advance, so that by the time you get to where you need to do that preventative maintenance, the schedule is already settled around it and there are no issues, and you can just proceed with that without causing any kind of disruption to the schedule.
Great. Just got a couple of questions left, and if anyone does want to ask any last questions, you can do so in the control panel of GoToWebinar there. So do you do the implementation, or do we?
So I'll take that one, and Neil, you can follow if you don't mind. With this, we absolutely have an implementation methodology that's tried and true that we follow and have been following for years. And that's why we have so many successful implementations, is that we know how to do it. And so we guide you with it, but it's not like you just walk away and come back and say, okay, go. You're a part of it all along the way. We keep you involved, and you have your input all along the way. And by the time you're ready to go live, you have a sense of ownership in that system, and you're ready to go.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to speak for both of our solutions too. And there's just a simple statement, right? It's during deployment for both solutions, it's configuration, not customization, right? So
Yes.
we both have really mature products, modern tech stacks, great user interfaces. We provide the implementation services to work efficiently with our customers, to make sure that we fully understand the details and the intricacies of your manufacturing environments, and we configure our solutions to deliver your success. Factors that are identified, during the discovery processes.
Okay.
All right, I've got one last question. Are there any industries that a combined APS and MES works better with?
You know, Neil, I mean, we are almost industry agnostic, just because of the flexible tool set that we have. So we can do discrete process, a combination of the above. I'm going to say we have no limitations on that.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I would say ShopVue MES leans more discrete, but we have a lot of success in process manufacturing. So yeah, agnostic is certainly the way forward, for sure. I would say right now there's traction and there's growth with our solutions in aerospace, in automotive, and in metal fabrication. But that's just the organizations that seem to be investing right now. But yeah.
Great. Okay, well, that's all the questions we have. So thank you, Hans and Neil. And if anyone has any more questions about APS or MES, or if you'd simply like to discuss any challenges you're facing, you can reach out to the teams through the channels shown, and they'll be happy to help. So all that's left for me to say is thank you for attending and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.